Hi everyone, I'm Tony.
In 2009, Deng, an ordinary karaoke bar's waitress, was sexually assaulted by two unknown men while on duty. They slapped her face with cash and forced her to bathe with them. Deng refused to give in at all costs. Just as the two men pinned her down, she pulled out a knife and stabbed them, leaving one dead and the other injured. What made this case sensational was that the two men were low-level officials from the local town. As a case of self-defense turned fatal, whether Deng's actions qualified as justifiable defense became the key point of the case. Now, let's dive into this real-life story. It was around 6 p.m. On the 10th of May, 2009. Deng was doing laundry in room 5 of the spa area on the first floor of Xingfeng Hotel. Later, she would claim that the spa area was a prostitution hotspot in the hotel, but she wasn't part of that trade. Let's rewind 1 month. Deng had just taken a job in the entertainment department of Xingfeng Hotel, working as a waitress who poured drinks and selected songs for karaoke bar's guests. The job wasn't tiring. She only worked about 2 hours each night, earning roughly 1,000 yuan a month, equivalent to around $150. The pay wasn't much, but for the 22-year-old Deng, it was enough to stop relying on her mother and grandfather for money. Deng had an inferiority complex. Her parents divorced when she was young, so she bounced between her father's, mother's, and grandmother's homes. At 17, she left hometown to work in a shoe factory in another city, only returning 3 months before the incident. Back home, she had her childhood best friend, Yanzi. The two were extremely close. Deng stayed at Yanzi's place rent-free and free of charge for a month, and Yanzi never complained. She even helped Deng find the job at Xingfeng Hotel, the very place where the tragedy unfolded. Now, back to the 10th of May, 2009. Deng was doing laundry in a room at the hotel when a tall man wearing glasses walked in. He came and went 2 or 3 times, then suddenly entered the room, locked the door behind him, and sat on the bed. His name is Huang. I'm going to take a bath, he told Deng. Okay, I'll leave right away, Deng replied. Standing up to head for the door, Huang stopped her. Hey, don't go, I want you to bathe with me. Deng quickly explained, I'm not here to help with bathing, I'm just an ordinary waitress. But as she reached the door, Huang grabbed her and pulled her back onto the bed. He then tried to take off her shirt, but her crossbody bag got in the way, and he struggled for a while without success. So he went for her pants instead. The pants were a few months old and already loose, and she wasn't wearing a belt that day. Huang pulled them down in one go. Deng fought back fiercely, kicking him hard with her leather shoes. The kicks hurt so much that Huang stood up in pain. Seizing the opportunity, Deng escaped, rushing out the door and into another staff lounge. By this point, Huang's actions already constituted indecent assault or even attempted rape. But he didn't stop. He chased Deng into the lounge. In front of 3 or 4 other waitresses, Huang yelled insults at Deng and continued to molest her. The commotion drew another man, Dan, who would end up dead in this case. That night, Dan was treating Huang and another colleague, Jia, to a night out at Xingfeng Hotel. All 3 were co-workers, and all 3 were officials from the town government. Earlier that day, they'd had a heavy drinking session at a restaurant, hosted by the manager of a local iron mine. The meal cost over 600 yuan, about $80, a pretty big sum back in those days. It was around 8 p.m. when they finished eating and arrived at the hotel. When Dan saw Huang arguing with a waitress, he flew into a rage. He started yelling at Deng, calling her a hypocrite who acts like a saint while indulging in vice. Then he did something that shocked everyone present. Deng pulled out a stack of 100 yuan bills, 40 notes in total, adding up to 4,000 yuan, about 4 millimeters thick, and slapped Deng across the face repeatedly with the cash. Aren't you just after money? He shouted, slapping her with each word. Ever seen this much cash before? Do you believe I'll beat you to death with it? Each slap stung physically, but more importantly, it was a brutal humiliation to Deng's dignity. With every slap, Deng stepped back, too scared to fight back. Until she hit the sofa behind her, she had nowhere left to go. Her patience had reached its breaking point. That's right, she screamed. I've never seen this much money. Go ahead, beat me to death today if you dare. Just then, the shift supervisor arrived and tried to mediate, telling Deng to go home first. But twice, when Deng tried to leave, Dan blocked her path and pushed her down onto a single-seat sofa. Then Dan and Huang pinned her down together, attempting to rape her in front of everyone. No one noticed that Deng was now holding a fruit knife in her hand. Everyone has a breaking point. After enduring constant humiliation and assault, Deng took out the knife and stabbed the 2 men. Dan was the closest. He was stabbed in the neck, left forearm, right chest, and right shoulder in quick succession. Seeing what happened, Huang rushed over to stop her, but ended up with a deep stab wound in his right arm. In an instant, the 2 men's arrogance vanished. Dan clutched his stomach, staggered to the door, and collapsed. Blood gushed from his neck, and the room fell dead silent. The incident happened so fast that everyone present froze in terror. Deng and Yanzi stared at each other, too shocked to move. Why did you use a knife? Yanzi asked. Deng stood there dumbfounded, unable to say a word. Both of them burst into tears. Some of the onlookers were so scared their legs gave out, and they sank to the floor. Then Deng pulled out her phone and called the police. "I've killed someone at Chongfeng Hotel," she said, her voice trembling. "Please come quickly." According to Yanzi's later recollection, Deng's face was as white as a sheet, and her hands were shaking uncontrollably when she made the call. The police arrived shortly after and took Deng away. On the drive to the police station, news came that 45-year-old Dan had died on the way to the hospital. That night of May 10, Deng cried non-stop in the police station office. On May 11, she was detained in criminal custody on suspicion of intentional homicide. During this search, criminal investigators found sleeping pills in her bag, so they sent her to the hospital for a medical examination and evaluation. Once at the hospital, Deng was placed under restrictive protection. Her wrists, ankles, and knees were restrained to limit her movement. But without a formal appraisal request from the police, the hospital didn't conduct a psychiatric evaluation on her at the time. While hospitalized, Deng kept screaming from her bed, "Dad! They hit me! Dad!" Meanwhile, Dan's wife learned of his death and rushed to the hospital. Unaware of the shameful circumstances behind her husband's demise, she was overcome with grief and rage. As for Huang, the other injured man, after being treated at the hospital, he vanished without a trace. Chongfeng Hotel was shut down the very next day after the incident. Rumors spread like wildfire in this small town of 50,000 residents, and media outlets from all over flocked to the scene. In the aftermath of the case, a county-wide rectification meeting for all cadres was held locally, with Dan held up as a prime example of misconduct. Local authorities issued 3 official case bulletins on May 12, 13, and 18 respectively. The content was largely similar, but some key details had been altered, and there was no mention of the suspects' official backgrounds. This only deepened the public's confusion about the case. The report made no mention of Deng being sexually assaulted. Instead, it claimed that the conflict erupted over a dispute about the price of a companion bathing service, which eventually led to the fatal stabbing. The conclusion also stated that Deng was responsible for Dan's death, so she was initially suspected of intentional homicide. This conclusion left the public unable to verify the truth. Was this a case of a virtuous woman standing up to lecherous officials, or a murder triggered by a dispute during an illegal transaction? As the case gained more and more national attention, 2 lawyers from a Beijing law firm decided to represent Deng free of charge on May 18. They arrived that very night and applied to meet with Deng in person. 2 days later, Deng completed the discharge procedures and was taken back into custody at the Public Security Bureau. But even after her release from the hospital, her psychiatric evaluation still hadn't been completed. How was her mental state? Was Deng suffering from depression? The official case bulletin said nothing about this. Deng's mother revealed that she had been receiving treatment for depression for 3 years. Yanzi, who had lived with Deng, said she often saw Deng lying awake all night, sometimes crying alone, and Deng had told her she was depressed. Would Deng's depression affect the court's verdict? As media coverage exploded, more and more people began to pay attention to the case. Various narratives emerged, including claims that Deng was innocent and that this was a story of a virtuous woman fighting back against corrupt officials. In online polls, a staggering 92% of respondents believed Deng had acted in justifiable defense and should be acquitted. The public's sympathy for Deng was understandable. It stemmed from anger at the ugly abuse of power and a desire for justice. But the more attention a case receives, the more it demands calm and objective scrutiny. While the outside world was abuzz with debate, Deng remained in detention, waiting for a fair verdict from the law. On the morning of June 16, the court opened its session to hear the case. In the end, the court ruled that since the incident took place in a staff lounge with many witnesses present, and there was no immediate threat of serious bodily harm, Deng was guilty of intentional assault. Intentional assault resulting in death can carry the death penalty or even life imprisonment in the most severe cases. Although Deng was convicted of intentional assault, the court took several mitigating factors into account, including the elements of justifiable defense, the psychiatric evaluation, diagnosis of mood disorder, her voluntary surrender to the police, and the fact that Dan and Huang had committed serious wrongful acts first. Taking all these factors into consideration, the court exempted Deng from criminal punishment, ruling that her actions constituted excessive defense. Excessive defense is already grounds for reduced punishment. Combined with her voluntary surrender and her status as a person with limited criminal liability due to depression, the court decided to waive her sentence entirely. This verdict was truly remarkable. It perfectly balanced legal justice with social justice. When the ruling was announced, it was met with widespread public approval. Even Deng herself was shocked that she wouldn't have to go to prison. At 4 p.m. on June 16, she signed the verdict to indicate her acceptance, then walked out of the courtroom. The case was officially closed. A year later, Deng gave another interview. By then, she had been arranged for a new job at a local TV station with an open-ended employment contract that would last until her retirement. She said she was doing well, her mental state and work were both great, and she wouldn't let down the people who had helped and cared about her. As for Huang and Jia, both were dismissed from their official positions. The owner of Xingfeng Hotel was also detained in criminal custody on charges of involvement in prostitution-related activities. It was truly a satisfying conclusion to the case. Alright, that's the full story of this case. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.